Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Now it's just gone past 9, so I'll talk for a couple of seconds just to give people a little bit of time to join, sort of the latecomers. But again, thank you very much for joining LYTT's latest webinar. And today our focus is going to be on well integrity. Now, if you've attended some of LYTT's previous webinars, this one's going to be slightly different, in that I'm sort of going to act as an interviewer and be the voice of the customer. So as we run through the webinar, all of the attendees, you're able to enter your questions into the chat box, and I will collate these questions as we go through Lilia's presentation, and I will endeavour to pick up the themes and basically ask the questions that you are putting forward. And of course, if we happen not to get to your question during the webinar, then I will personally get back to you post the webinar to answer the questions that we couldn't put to Lilia during the presentation. Okay, so with that, I say we're a minute past the hour, so if we just go to the next slide, Lilia, so we can just introduce ourselves. Thank you. Okay, everyone, so my name is Glynn Lockyer, and I'm a business development for LYTT. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I started off my career in research and development for a production logging tool manufacturer in sort of the cased hole and open hole designs sort of market. So that's sort of my initial background, and which is one of the reasons I was really excited about joining LYTT. But more recently, I've been in commercial roles for the last 10 years with a number of international service companies. So that's me. Let me hand you over to Lilia so she can introduce herself.
Thank you, Glynn, and hi to everyone on this call. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Lilia Noble. I'm the Well Integrity Technical Product Owner at LYTT. I have around 14 years of experience in oil and gas. I started my career in the field as a wireline engineer running wireline operations. And for the last 6 years, I have been involved with well integrity, mainly providing well integrity data interpretation. I have been with LYTT for the last year, and my role at LYTT is centered around well integrity, product strategy, and vision.
Very good. Okay, so now we've introduced ourselves. If we can just start, I will just sort of introduce you to the agenda and explain what we're going to talk about today. So before I run through the specifics of what Lilia is going to go into, today's primary focus is going to be on distributed acoustic sensing. And I'm going to make the assumption that most of the audience here have an understanding of what that actually is. And the key message today is how DAS, or distributed acoustic sensing, compares to the old methodologies that have been used for well integrity monitoring. And I think the crucial thing that I want everyone to take away from today's webinar is what DAS can do in addition to what the old techniques can. The old techniques methodologies aren't bad. They do a fantastic job, but DAS can add an extra dimension to your well integrity challenges and understanding them. So to give everyone a quick sort of the way that I like to look at DAS, and obviously I'm from a production logging tool background, sort of cased hole. So I always like to envisage you have 1,000 temperature sensors all in a single string. And I think everyone can see that if you had 1,000 tools in one string, you can basically monitor the entire well. You can record everything that's going on in your well ecosystem, and it gives you a sort of unparalleled insight into what you can find out and understand. So obviously everyone knows that large leaks are easy to find, but the difficult thing and the real challenge is with small leaks, and especially with P&A, so plug and abandonment. Typically you have very small leaks sort of going through cemented annuli, and for this I think DAS is the perfect solution. And again, Lilia is going to concentrate on that during our case study sort of later on. I say because obviously if you're not in the right place at the right time with a small leak, you're just not going to see it. And I think the final thing before I go into the agenda is that obviously all of these technologies, and even Lilia's case study today, has been sort of reactive. So you already know when you have a problem, and so you go in and try and solve it. But I think the really exciting thing about DAS and the potential of DAS is that we're now moving more into a predictive stage, where DAS can actually predict when you may have an integrity failure, something like a packer failing. So it's a really exciting technology, and as I say, Lilia's case study today is a really nice example of how it can work and how it can make your lives easier and make you more effective. So quick run through of the agenda. We're going to give an overview of the industry challenges. Lilia's going to do a deep dive into the traditional technologies and some of their limitations. We'll then explain what DAS really is. And then obviously we'll go into the really fun stuff, which is the case study. So with that, Lilia, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Glynn. So I wanted to also say that this case is based on the ADIPEC paper. And if you do want to get back to it, so please go ahead. So with that, I wanted to talk about some of the challenges that the well integrity is facing in current times. So the main objective of well integrity is to prevent uncontrolled release of reservoir fluids throughout the life cycle of the well. And there are many reasons for the well integrity related failures, and typically they are associated with formation integrity issues or well body element failures. Some of the more typical failures are presented on the figure on this slide and are related to casing and tubing leaks, leaks in packers and valves, flow behind casing due to poor cement placement or degradation of cement barriers over time, failure of formation barriers, flow along faults, fractures, and abandoned parent well bores. When we think about these failures, how do they manifest themselves? We could see escape of reservoir fluids to surface. There could be a cross flow to shallow permeable zones, or there could be a development of the sustained casing pressure.
So yeah, thanks, Lilia. That's a nice overview of the challenges, obviously the generic well integrity challenges. I mean, I think everyone on the call understands that well integrity is a global issue. It doesn't matter really whether you have an aging well stock or even new wells. There's always potential problems here. But I think what this really nicely highlights is that leaks are not just your tubing or your primary barrier leaks. So they're not just your tubing leaks or holes in casing. You know, a leak is really any unintended flow, and that could be, I say, flow past a packer or even sand breaking through. So I say integrity, it's not just about sort of tubing. I mean, DAS opens up a whole new world of, you know, allows you to monitor all of your challenges in well integrity. So a quick question, Lilia, and one that's popped up is of these all of these challenges with the well integrity, what's the most prevalent that you see on a day-to-day basis at LYTT?
So I say that there are different type of challenges that we could see depending on the stage of the life that the well is in. So for example, we would see different type of challenges in the drilling and completion phase as to compare to production intervention or plug and abandonment. At LYTT, we predominantly deal with permanent fiber installations, and as such, we would be looking at the well integrity issues related to production and intervention or plug and abandonment stages. I would probably highlight the resolution of sources of sustained casing pressure as the more common one that we come across with, and that could be related to tubing and casing leaks, failure of completion elements, or formation barrier failures.
Okay, thanks, Lilia.
So with that, let's have a look at the traditional methodologies that are available to the industry for leak and flow behind casing detection. So some of them are displayed on this slide, but detection of any of the well integrity problems will start with surface-based observations. So this could be things like analysis of the downhole and surface pressure gauge data, pressure testing, leak-off testing. This type of methods, this type of observations will tell you that there is a problem. However, you will not be able to identify the exact location downhole. And this is where the rest of the listed methods come into play. Use of drill packers and resettable drill pipe and resettable packers have been historically used a lot. However, they do require presence of the rig. They are time intensive and they do not provide a good depth accuracy. Probably cheapest and simplest method that historically was used is leak line ponytails. However, it does require presence of the large volume of flow, and it's not always reliable. The next group of tools is tools measuring internal diameter of the tubing. So this could be multi-finger calipers, ultrasonic imagers, electromagnetic thickness logging tools. So this can indicate where the leak is located. However, they do not measure the leak itself. They measure the pipe condition. And therefore, it's down to the interpreter to then decide where the actual leak is. The last two groups of tools are production logging tools and noise logging tools. So these are valid methods. However, there is a limitation of, as with any of these tools, is that they provide only a snapshot view of the data. That means any of the flow events prior to the time the tool is logged or after that will not be recorded, and therefore the analysis is done just on this one snapshot view of the data. The other thing to remember is that leaks and flow, they are very dynamic in nature. So the tool has to be at the right depths at the time when the leak is active to record it. So if the leak is intermittent or the leak is periodic in nature, that could completely be missed by this type of tools.
No, thanks, Lilia. No, good points. And it harps back to what I mentioned about, DAS is almost like having 1,000 of these tools in the well at one time. So you can answer all these questions. So okay, another quick question. So in your experience, I mean, which of these technologies are primarily being used today?
I would say that this depends on the expectation to behavior of this leak and its location. So if the expected location of the leak is within the tubing, so it's tubing to annulus communication, the most probably likely tool or most commonly used tool would be a production logging tools. However, in a more complex cases where you have flow behind casing, then probably techniques like temperature or noise logging tools are more appropriate.
Okay, and actually, I think you've already answered this next question, but I'll ask it anyway. So what's coming is obviously so most of these technologies, I say, or the traditional ones, are very effective at locating tubing leaks, as you've just said, and I say, but obviously, in fact, you've already said it. So, but they're not very effective at detecting flow behind casing. That's correct.
Yeah, that's right. So all of this pretty much, the use of drill pipe, resettable packers, slick line ponytails, tools measuring internal diameters, spinners, they're mainly centered around detecting of the flow in the tubing. So in the tubular where they are run themselves. So yeah, for the flow behind casing is more of a temperature and noise logging techniques.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lilia.
So with that, let's move on to the technology that we want to discuss today that is used by LYTT and is based on DAS. DAS stands for Distributed Acoustic Sensing. It uses fiber optic cables to record acoustic measurements through time and over entire length of the fiber. Unlike traditional point sensors, fiber itself acts as a sensing element with no additional transducers in the optical chain. And there are a number of challenges associated with use of DAS data, and those are specifically related to the ability to detect events of interest. In our case, would be flow and leak events from the overall background acoustics, and the ability to deal with large data volumes produced by the DAS systems. As an example, one DAS unit can produce up to 1 terabyte of data per hour. So this could be like streaming of 1,000 movies per hour, for example. So at LYTT, we use intelligent data extraction, where we extract signals and features most relevant to the event of interest. We denoise data to decouple fluid movement signals from the background noise, apply signature recognition to extract flow events, and therefore we are able to construct fluid flow logs over entire lengths of the fiber every second. And signature recognition is based on the knowledge of what the fluid entry and transport noise sound like on DAS data. It was developed in this experimental setup. The picture of it is displayed here on the slide. And it was further validated through field trials. Resulting flow logs help to clearly identify tubing and casing leaks, flow behind casing, and help to monitor overburden integrity. DAS well integrity monitoring systems help to identify well integrity challenges throughout each of the stages of well life. So starting from drilling and completion through to production, intervention, and plug and abandonment. With all above said, we have to remember that for the leak to be detected, that leak has to be there. Therefore, any leak acquisition, leak detection job has to center around system pressure manipulation, and the ultimate goal of this is to initiate and accelerate leak sources and leak pathways that's already existing in the well. So with that, DAS acquisition workflow will typically consist of the 5 following steps. The first is the pre-job analysis and preparation. This is where we will define possible scenarios of the leak sources and pathways. The second is a baseline flow logging, where we will record level of background acoustics in undisturbed pressure system. The third is to record events during annular pressure manipulation. The fourth is then to analyze recorded data and either confirm or reject any of the earlier identified scenarios. And then the last step is to repeat dust data acquisition and analysis following remediation steps. And this is where we will either eliminate the source of the leak and restore well integrity, or we will agree on the way ahead on the issue.
Okay, I mean, I find that actually very interesting, Lilia. Obviously, so from my case-told background, obviously the workflow that you've just described there is almost identical to what you would use perhaps for a production logging tool sort of integrity job. But again, I guess the other thing that I've taken from this is that you know, the LYTT has solved the big data challenge with DAS data, as you say, you know, 1,000 films streamed at once. You know, being able to intelligently unpick just the useful pieces of information has really been a game changer, certainly for LYTT. So with that, a couple of questions have come through. So LYTT has made some progress on extracting features. Does this now mean that potentially you could perform a DAS leak detection job in real time?
Yes, absolutely. Since there is a solution to the big data challenge, we are able to stream features and perform event detection real time. Additionally, we can also, for example, perform an anomaly at the edge or at the processing unit itself at site.
Okay, no, that's what. No, I mean that's good to know. And I say another step forward with distributed sensing. So, and leading on from that, does that mean obviously or potentially that you could do a leak detection job faster using DAS than you could do with the traditional methodologies?
Yeah, I guess when you think of the traditional methodologies, you would have to spend time rigging up, rigging down. You would have to spend time getting to the required depths, performing station measurements, performing repeat passes. All of that is eliminated with permanent fiber installation, for example. You don't have to rig up and rig down. You don't have to get the required depths before you are able to perform the measurement. There is no need to perform the repeat passes, as we are taking measurements every second, and pretty much each one of them could be considered as a repeat pass. And there is no need to perform stations. So yeah, overall, I would say the survey is then limited only by the periods of baseline logging and the pressure manipulation steps.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lilia. Perfect.
So with that, let us move on to the case study. So this was a case of a gas well with history of sustained annular pressure of a low rate of buildup in both B and C annuli. The initial attempt at P&A was made, however, the CP remained, and in fact, it left the well in a more complex state where both B and C annuli were now in communication. When we think of the sources of the flow, it was believed that B annulus was charged by the group of sands, gas-bearing group of sands DPZ2, distinct permeable zone 2, and the C annulus was charged by the group of sands DPZ1, which were the water-bearing sands. If we look at the annulus pressure trend here on the slide, red shows the B annulus pressure, green is the C annulus pressure, and we can see that prior to the abandonment attempt in year 3, there was clear separation between the trends in this pressure data. However, following the abandonment attempt in year 3, there was communication now established between the two annuli. And in fact, the C annulus, so this is the green line, showing this interesting behavior of cyclic charging and then bleeding off at the threshold pressure. That believed to be a 16-inch liner shoe leak-off pressure. So the well was planned to be abandoned using 3 well barrier elements, so well barrier element number 1 and the combination of well barrier elements 2 and 3. Since this was a case of flow behind casing, and there was no knowledge of whether it was consistent flow, whether the flow was intermittent, the distributed acoustic sensing was considered to be the more optimal technology of choice. And therefore, DAS was performed. DAS was done in 3 runs. I will show the schematics of these runs in the following slides, but I will just mention what they were at this stage. So DAS run number 1 was performed prior to the placement of any of the barriers. DAS run number 2 was performed post placement of the first well barrier element, and DAS run number 3 was performed following placement of the combination of well barrier elements 2 and 3. Each of the DAS runs consisted of the 3 phases. The first phase was the baseline flow log, where the background acoustics were recorded in the undisturbed pressure system. The second was the C annulus bleed, where the C annulus was bled in an attempt to activate water-bearing DPZ1 group of sands. And the third phase was the B annulus bleed, where the B annulus was bled in an attempt to activate gas-bearing group of sands DPZ2. At this point, I have to say that though C and B annulus bleeds were performed, there was an evidence of flow even within the baseline flow log data. And therefore, any of the data that will be shown in the following slides is based on the baseline flow logs.
Thanks, Lilia. Yeah, I mean, I think that shows how sensitive DAS can be. Obviously, with the traditional methodologies, you're relying on a certain energy level that's coming from the leak to be able to identify it. So I think this nicely demonstrates the sensitivity of DAS to the lower frequencies and actually to the smaller energy signals. So very good.
That is right. Yeah, it was a low rate of buildup. So moving on to DAS run number 1. So this slide shows the schematic of this run. So the DAS run number 1 was performed from just above the Packard depths. And on the right here, we can see the acoustic profile of the well recorded by DAS, with under that chart is the gamma ray data. So what we can see looking at this acoustic profile is that there is clearly an evidence of flow within this logged interval. The 3 lines here are the 3 time slices taken within the same baseline of the run number 1 data. Correlating gamma ray data with the SANS 10 and SANS 11 allows us to see that there are sources of flow within this specific interval, and also there are interpreted deeper sources of flow based on the upward trend across shale 10. And based on this information, the operator decided that the well barrier element number 1 will be extended all the way to the formation. That was not originally the plan. However, based on this data, that's what was decided, that it will be extended laterally all the way and installed across shale 10 within DPZ1. So this was one of the important observations based on this run. And the second was related to the planned placement of the well barrier element 2 and 3, the combinational barrier. So originally it was planned to be placed within shale 16, as I highlighted there. However, based on the acoustic profile, there is still signature of the acoustic flow, so elevated acoustic amplitude across this interval. And therefore it was decided that most optimally, the placement of this barrier is to be moved within the shallower shale 18, where the acoustic profile is dropped to what is believed to be a background level. So after the DAS run number 1 was performed, the well barrier element number 1 was installed. It was extended laterally to the formation, installed across shale 10 within DPZ1. It was weighed positively and negatively tested, and it confirmed a good barrier in place. And after that, the DAS run number 2 was performed from the depths above the well barrier element number 1. So the slide here on the right, again, is similar to the previous one. However, the top chart now shows the comparison of the run number 1 in blue acoustic profile and run number 2 in red acoustic profile. As we can see within the lower logged interval, there is a clear change in the acoustic profile post-installation of the first well barrier element, and there is a drop in the acoustic amplitude, confirming that it was effective in containing the flow. However, within the upper section, there is still evidence of flow within shales 14 and 15 behind 16-inch liner. When we look at the planned depths of installation of the well body element 2 and 3, so there is a clear change in the acoustic profile. However, it still supports the understanding that this barrier has to be moved shallower into shale 16, where acoustic profile drops even further. So following the run number 2, combinational barrier elements 2 and 3 were installed. They were installed laterally extending to 16-inch liner. They were weighed positively and negatively tested, similar to the well barrier element number 1, and again confirmed the good barrier in place. The chart here on the right shows the comparison of acoustic profiles within run number 1 in blue, run number 2 in red, and run number 3 post placement of the combinational barrier elements 2 and 3 in black. This comparison of the profiles shows that there is little or no acoustic noise captured in run 3 in the baseline data post installation of the well barrier element 2 and 3. There is similar behavior observed in acoustic response in DAS run number 2 and 3 in the baseline logs. And that brings us to case conclusions. The value of DAS technology was instrumental in both the planned execution of the well barrier elements and verification of their success. Firstly, the well barrier element number 1 was laterally extended to the formation based on run number 1 that showed noise trend across shale 10 that indicated lack of sealing behind 13.58-inch casing. Based on that, operator was able to take a decision to extend this lateral barrier all the way to the formation, milling through both 9.58 and 13.58-inch casing. Secondly, the position of the well barrier element 2 and 3, combinational well barrier element, was adjusted based on run number 1 and run number 2 data that showed evidence of flow outside of the 16-inch liner within DPZ1. And it was moved from shale 18 to shale 16. And lastly, a reduction in noise post-installation of the well barrier element provided further support of the successful placement of the barriers. As a result, BNC annual SCP had significantly reduced, conducted pressure tested of the placed well barrier elements, showed no notable fluid movement, further confirming correct selection of well barrier element placement, depths, and strategy.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lilia. Now we've got 3 minutes left, and I say some more questions have popped up. So I think the first one, and it sort of needs a little bit of reinforcing, is why was DAS? Can you remind everyone why DAS was chosen specifically for this application and not the more traditional methods?
Yeah, so DAS was chosen because this is the case of flow behind casing. So the selection of technologies then is a bit less as to compare to the flow inside the tubing. Additionally, there was no knowledge of the type of flow that we would encounter. Would it be an intermittent noise? Would it be a consistent noise? And therefore, this aspect of distributed measurement, where in essence sensors are located across entire length of the fiber, and we're able to take measurements every second and therefore achieve full understanding of evolution of the events in time, is very powerful, very attractive, and I think that is what made such a clear choice for an operator in terms of technology.
No, understood. And the other theme that's coming up is sort of the depth of investigation of the DAS and how far it can see into the well completion and potentially into the reservoir. So I guess how are we, or how were you able to differentiate between the flows that were in those outer annuli?
So currently, the differentiation between the flow within different annulus is done based on interpretation. At this point, just based on data, DAS data alone, we cannot say radial location of the flow. However, usually the leak detection programs are performed sequentially, where we manipulate each annulus in sequence. Therefore, the response of that annulus manipulation, and also additional data such as wellhead pressure or annulus pressure usually are able to help us to clearly identify the exact location radially as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lilia. I say if you just flip onto the last slide, so I know we're now 1 second over time, but I wanted to well, first of all, thank you, Lilia, for talking us through your paper today. And obviously, if everyone wants to find Lilia's paper, sort of well integrity flow detection using novel acoustic pattern recognition algorithms, I say you can download it from One Petro. The paper number, if you want some bedtime reading, is, where have I put it, Lilia? Do you know the paper number off the top of your head? It is SPE 203447-MS. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to Lilia or myself. Our contact details are up there on the screen. So I say with that, I say I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. I think the key takeaways for me basically is the sensitivity that DAS can provide, and it opens up a whole new opportunity and a whole new window of integrity analysis that previously was unavailable. And I think, I say, the really exciting thing is the fact that we can now be more predictive rather than just reactive, which is what we've been in the past. So very good. So with that, I say reach out to Lilia or myself. I will answer all of the questions that I haven't been able to get through today when we've been talking to Lilia. But to say thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.